Parshas Seitzei, among the many mitzvos in this week's parsha, is the description of Ben Sorer Umoreh, rebellious son. It's horrible. The depiction of a child's actions is being totally self-consumed, one might say narcissistic. He drinks himself into a stupor. He's a glutton. And he gets to the point where his parents are figuratively tearing their hair out, and they drag him to the Beis and they say, this young man does not listen to us. And depending on the conditions, it can be to such an extreme, the Torah says, that the child can be put to death. Terrible, awful. It's disconcerting to anybody who hears about it. Now, the Torah says that he can be put to death, but the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Ayin Aleph, the Talmud says, Ben Sorer Umoreh lo haya v'lo asid lihios. Ben Sorer Umoreh, this whole episode of a child that's put to death because of his wanton, reckless, self-indulgent behavior, never was and never will be. So first let's look at the verses, and then let's talk about the Gemara's approach. So the verse says, and this is in Perek Chaf Aleph, Pasuk Yud Ches, that's 21:18. Ki yiheh le'ish ben sorer umoreh. If a man will have a wayward and rebellious son, enenu shomea b'kol aviv uv'kol imo, and he does not listen to the voice of his father and the voice of his mother, v'yisru oso v'lo yishma lehem, and they discipline him, they warn him, but he doesn't listen. V'safsu bo aviv v'imo, so his mother and father grab him. They take him to the elders and to the gates, which refers to the Beis, the court. V'amru, and they say, and this verse is going to be significant in understanding the Gemara's position that Ben Sorer Umoreh never was and never will be. V'amru el ziknei iro, and they will say unto the elders of a city, B'neinu zeh sorer umoreh, this child of ours is rebellious and wayward. Enenu shomea b'kolenu zolel v'soveh. He doesn't listen to our voice. He is a drunkard, or he drinks to excess, and he eats to excess. And then it talks about how the punishment of death. So the Gemara says that it never was and never will be. Why? Because it says ad shehiyu kolan shavim. They have to be, their voices have to be equal. Their appearance, the voices of the parents have to be equivalent, as do their stature and their appearance. And that is impossible. Now, the Gemara doesn't say exactly why it's impossible. Some of the Meforshim explain that physically it's impossible. You could rely on the Gemara later on in Sanhedrin that says that every individual is unique, b'kol b'deo b'mareh, in their voice and in their appearance and how they think. So if every individual is unique, so it's never going to happen that their appearance and their voices and their stature will be identical. But the Gemara deduces this from a grammatic anomaly. The phrase in the verse that we cited, which was 20, says, Enenu shomea b'kolenu. He doesn't listen to our voice. That's singular. Kol shalanu. The voice, not the voices, the voice of ours. To say our voices, it would have to be either, the Meforshim, the commentaries point out, it would either have to say Kol Lenu with a Yud, Kuf Vav Lamed Yud Nun Vav, which would imply plural, many voices or more than one voice, or B'Kol Lo Senu, or in our voices, a different way of saying the plural voice. So Kol Lenu means our voice, implying that the parents are speaking with one voice. My Rabbi Rav Ahron Soloveichik explained the Gemara by saying that if parents speak with one voice, meaning that they share the same values and they communicate the same message to their child, then a Ben Sorer Umoreh will never happen. The child will have direction, the child will have guidance. It's only when a child hears mixed messages from his parents, he gets different values and different advice and different direction from his parents, that can turn him into an undisciplined and rebellious and wayward child. Now, there's something interesting in the Gemara. The Gemara says that Ben Sorer Umoreh never was and never will be. Says, so why is it written? If it never was and never will be, so leave it out of the Torah. What impact does it have on the reader? What impact does it have on the world? Of what significance is it if it never was and never will be? So the Gemara says, drosh v'kabel schar. Drosh, like the word medrash or drasha, it means extract. Seek, lidrosh, literally means to seek. It means to delve into every aspect of the mitzvah and receive reward. What does that mean? So it means extract the lessons, such as the one we just talked about, the lessons of parenting, that parents have to be on the same page and have to communicate the same message, and if they don't, they can expect trouble. Now here's the curveball. Rabbi Yonasan says, Ani re'isiv v'yoshavti al kivro. I saw him and I sat on his grave. So everybody says it never was and never will be, except for Rabbi Yonasan, who says that he saw a Ben Soramar. How does that work? But here it gets even more curiouser and curiouser. Rabbi Yonasan says also about Ir Hanidachas. Ir Hanidachas is a city in Israel that virtually all, majority, close to all of its inhabitants become Ovdei Avodah Zarah, become pagan worshippers. And the halacha is that it gets destroyed if that's the case. And the Gemara again says, Ir Hanidachas lo hoisavlo asido lihios, that Ir Hanidachas, this corrupt city, never was and never will be. And also on a technicality. What's the technicality? If the city even has one mezuzah, says the Gemara, then you can't burn it down. So again, why is it written? And again, the Gemara says, drosh v'kabel schar. Explore and receive reward. What leads to the social contagion of pagan worship? What leads to widespread corruption in values? That's something to examine. And it's something that we can take a lesson that can benefit us from, or simply understanding the values. But Rabbi Yonasan, the same one, says, Ani re'isiha v'yashavti al tilah. I saw it, meaning an Ir Hanidachas, a wayward city, and I sat on its rubble, on its mound. And Rav Shimon Schwab asks, how is it? All the Chachmei Yisrael, all the wise men of Israel, they all say, never was, never will be, both about Ben Sora Mora and about Ir Hanidachas. And here you have Rabbi Yonasan. He says, Eza Mazal, what kind of mazel did Rabbi Yonasan have that he saw both? It's remarkable. You can add to this question, which is Rabbi Yonasan was a Kohen. How could he sit on the kever, on the grave of anyone? Kohen is not allowed to expose himself to ritual impurity, defilement, by coming in contact with a dead body or sitting over it. So Schwab says, based on a Gemara, that even though Batei Din, even though courts may be abolished, nevertheless the punishments that they execute are carried out in a more natural way, and so it's possible that a Ben Sora Mora would have died on his own as a result of his waywardness, and the same thing with the city that got burned down. It doesn't answer the question about Rabbi Yonasan being a Kohen, but it's Rav Schwab's approach. I would like to suggest that Rabbi Yonasan is actually not disagreeing with the opinion in the Gemara that Ben Sora Mora never was and never will be, and the same with Ir Hanidachas. When he says, I saw him and I sat on his grave, meaning the Ben Sora Mora, the wayward son, or I saw it, meaning the rebellious or wayward city, and I sat on its rubble. What he is explaining is the extent to which a person has to visualize the situation that he's examining in order to fulfill the exhortation of the sages, drosh v'kabel schar. You have to really get into it. You have to really examine it. And examine it means not just learn the technicalities, but imagine yourself involved firsthand in the pain, in the suffering, in the end, in the consequence of this individual or this community. Whenever I believe what the Gemara is saying, especially according to this understanding of Rabbi Yonasan, is whenever there is a situation, a horrific narrative in the Torah, such as this, we have to get into it, roll up our sleeves, and imagine ourselves in the middle of it so that we can gain extra understanding. And if it's a bad situation, how to avoid it. And if it's a good situation, how to bring it about. Have a good Shabbos.